Elden Ring. Oh. A couple weeks ago, I made a quick trailer breakdown for GameSpot based on my initial impressions of Elden Ring's exciting gameplay reveal from Summer Game Fest. Since then, a lot has happened. Hidetaka Miyazaki has revealed a plethora of new information through various interviews. So, I'd love to break down what we know so far about the game into further detail, especially since all the gameplay we've seen so far has been recontextualized thanks to these interviews. Let's start with the solo gameplay. In an interview for Famitsu magazine, translated by The Angry Furlong on Reddit, Miyazaki revealed that the game will feature a heavy amount of customization and lots of ways to tackle dangerous situations in the game. The game borrows heavily from gameplay mechanics of From Software's Dark Souls series in particular, and while the game could very well have been Dark Souls 4, Miyazaki and team wanted the freedom of a brand new world and IP. But there are still plenty of things that are borrowed from Dark Souls, including the fact that you're playing a nameless character who you create and customize the appearance of. Elden Bling, here we come. There will also be a large variety of weapons and spells, both of which we saw showcased in the trailer, but something unique will be the way Elden Ring handles weapon arts, which were first introduced in Dark Souls 3. In Dark Souls 3, weapon arts were special attacks that were tied to a specific weapon. However, in Elden Ring, these weapon arts will be separate skills you're able to somehow gain and collect. Every weapon has one weapon art slot, and you customize your weapon by equipping a weapon art to it. According to Miyazaki, there will be around 100 weapon arts that you'll be able to obtain. Another added element to the way you can tackle enemy encounters comes in the form of spirits you can now summon. While the specifics of this mechanic are still a little fuzzy to me, we saw it showcased in the gameplay trailer when the player character crushes a cube. In the Souls games, the markers for cooperative NPC phantoms you could summon to help you in battles would appear on the ground, and you had to meet certain conditions, like not being hollow, in order to be allowed to summon certain characters, like Solaire. I'm not certain yet how to gain spirits, but what I do know is that they're going to be, according to Miyazaki, basically based on enemies. So, does that mean it's like Pokemon, where you trap a weakened enemy into a cube, and now it's your ally? Finally, the Dark Souls Pokemon game we've all been waiting for. And by we, I mean me. Kind of be like Persona 5, in a way, if you think about it. But there are so many possibilities for how you might gain these spirits that I don't feel good about fully speculating on it. The spirits are an extremely interesting addition though, because they're essentially another weapon and tool at your disposal. They act like weapons, armor, or magic that you equip to your character, and interestingly, just like a weapon, you can even level up these individual spirits. However, similar to summoning a phantom in Dark Souls, you're only allowed to summon these spirits in certain places. They widely vary from shield characters who protect you, to archers that'll aid you in the back line, decoys, and more. According to Miyazaki, there are even some spirits who will be pretty much useless, so I'm just imagining the pendant from Dark Souls being a spirit you summon that just falls in the grass and does nothing. You then leveled up to 100, hoping it'll be like Magikarp, and it just sits there, taunting you. Another new yet familiar element will be stealth. Stealth was, of course, first introduced in and a major part of From Software's last game, Sekiro, and this mechanic will be making a return for Elden Ring, allowing you to approach a dangerous situation in a completely different way, and I have to imagine it'll make backstabs a whole lot easier to accomplish. And speaking of which, we have confirmation that parrying enemies will be back. Another gameplay element first introduced in Sekiro and making its way over at Elden Ring is jumping. Jumping was a critical feature of battle in Sekiro, and it sounds like it will work in a similar way in Elden Ring, allowing you to jump over low sweeping attacks. I do wonder what that means for dodging in iframes if jumping is a viable means of countering your enemies. In the trailer, we do see a couple moments where it looks clear that the player is dodging away and iframes are saving them. Later on in the trailer, the wolf-like boss shoots a magic beam at the player, and the player dodges it by dashing through the beam, which looks like it's straight out of Bloodborne. Again, the dodge and iframes save the player character from injury. Immediately after, the wolf-like boss performs a low sweeping attack, and this time the player character chooses to jump over it instead of dashing through it. So I think it's clear that dodging and iframes will work the exact same way they did in Dark Souls. The question is, are there certain attacks you'll only be able to properly dodge by jumping? It's definitely going to be interesting to see how important jumping is from a defensive perspective. From an offensive perspective, you can now jump for a heavy attack. There is a shot at the end of the Elden Ring trailer which shows the player jumping and striking at one of the game's demigod bosses. Admittedly, on first watching the trailer, I thought this was just something cinematic they were showing, but after reading Miyazaki's interview, it's clear that this is a strike the player can perform. Miyazaki also compared the combat of Elden Ring to Sekiro and its resurrection mechanic. While Elden Ring will not feature a resurrection mechanic, which allow players to feel a sense of progression and progress without ruining their gameplay rhythm, Elden Ring will feature similar elements to keep players engaged and allow for a sense of meta progression. Something I found extremely notable from an IGN interview with Hidetaka Miyazaki was a statement about the stamina bar, something that has been a prominent feature of Souls and derivative Souls-like games. According to Miyazaki, the stamina bar exists in Elden Ring, but we feel it has less influence on the player overall. We wanted to make it feel less restrictive and contribute to that level of freedom more so than our previous titles. One of the game's major additions will be horseback riding, and yes, I realize they look like Yakuls from Princess Mononoke, but for the time being, horseback riding is the term he's been using in interviews. We see a number of battles take place on horseback. This includes one against what looks to be a more normal enemy and one against a dragon. As we see this horseback boss battle against the dragon in the trailer, I do wonder if you're limited to only using your horse in certain scenarios in the game. Miyazaki has stated that in multiplayer you won't be able to travel on horseback. So here's what I think might be the case. As Miyazaki has stated, there's a large open field you traverse via horse, and in your travels, you'll find 6 larger vertically designed dungeon areas known as Legacy Dungeons. Perhaps once you reach a Legacy Dungeon, you're no longer allowed to call your horse. This would mean that for any boss or enemy you find in the open field, your horse is another tool and way to fight. There will also be smaller abandoned villages and ruins, and you'll find bosses in some of these you can use your horse to fight as well. In his Famitsu interview, Miyazaki stated, "Travel on horseback will be limited to the open field, but I think it really feels nice. So this would make sense to me." And speaking of which, in the battle against the dragon, there's a scene where you don't just jump once, but double jump in mid-air, so it's clear that the horse will have unique skills not just for traversing the world's terrain, but even for battle. Unlike previous From Software games, you'll be able to craft and customize items in Elden Ring from various materials you find in the world. Miyazaki states that, while there will be more resources for you to recover your health this time around, as you'll be fighting for longer than in previous games, presumably in between other checkpoints, HP recovery will still be handled in a special way comparable to previous titles. When it comes to overall difficulty of Elden Ring, Miyazaki compares it to Dark Souls 3. Like the spirits I was mentioning, you don't have to rely on pure mechanical skill, but can use strategy to defeat your enemies. We are emphasizing a strategic approach to combat in this game. This leads me nicely into multiplayer. We have official confirmation that there will be cooperative gameplay and PvP within Elden Ring. When it comes to cooperative multiplayer, the game has been further expanded to allow players to create groups. These groups will have a special appearance and are matched via password, and a group can be of an unlimited size, at least for the time being. All of this, to me, sounds like it means From Software is going to allow clans within Elden Ring. You'll be prioritized in matchmaking with any group you set. So if you want to create a Kirk fan club a la Iron Pineapple, it sounds like you'll be able to quickly match with your friends far more easily than in any previous Souls game. That said, beyond this, it's hard to say if there will be any additional functionality for these groups beyond easier matchmaking. Overall, the co-op will function similarly to Dark Souls and summon signs, with players only able to be summoned in certain areas, and then being booted out after defeating a boss. Something that some players struggled with in Sekiro was that, unlike the Souls games, there weren't too many options for progressing in the game beyond getting better at the game's core mechanics. With Elden Ring, Miyazaki will be keeping the relative difficulty of the game similar to Souls, but including many ways for players who are less skilled mechanically to progress, including this element of cooperative play with other online players. And while co-op has existed in every Souls game, including Demon Souls, Miyazaki hopes to lower the barrier of entry for this element of the game. In order to do this, Elden Ring will limit how many resources are necessary for multiplayer, and you'll no longer need to use a semi-rare resource like humanity in order to summon. While there aren't too many details about the PvP as of yet, we do have confirmation that it will exist thanks to an interview with the Russian website Ekromania, translated by Calibrono and Sulky Spacebat on Reddit. Apparently, Miyazaki was noticeably excited to talk about the PvP, and says there will be both invasions and optional PvP. He also stated the team is working to make PvP less irritating for both players. Hopefully that means we'll actually get some kind of PvP arena in the vanilla game. He also specifically mentioned trying to add certain information so PvP wouldn't just be an endless game of hide and seek. I have to imagine that thanks to the sheer amount of customization for player builds within Elden Ring, PvP will thrive in this game, especially if groups are matched with other groups of similar sizes. Finally, while there will be a return of covenants in Elden Ring, Miyazaki specifically compared it to Demon Souls, which has no covenants. In this regard, he said there's no minimum requirement for multiplayer and that while covenants will return, they're more so for role-playing and to spice things up. My personal favorite map design of any From Software game has been Dark Souls. The game has an interwoven world, and it's a blast discovering every major shortcut and way to progress from one area to another. However, every game has handled traversal in a slightly different manner. Because there was no warping in Dark Souls until the latter half of the game, this interwoven map design was incredibly important to making traversal less of a slog and much more of a reward. Demon Souls and Bloodborne both featured a main hub with warping to distinct and separate disconnected major areas. Those areas were oftentimes interwoven within themselves, but fairly distinct. Meanwhile, Dark Souls 2 and 3 allowed for warping right off the bat from one checkpoint to another. This meant that the overall maps weren't as interwoven, but had distinct branches that would jut out. While Miyazaki has stated that there will indeed be a hub area players won't be able to access at the start of the game, but can eventually gain access to, I think Elden Ring will be completely distinct in this regard. According to Miyazaki, the overall world design will feel more like a classic RPG. The open field of the game serves to expand the scale of the story, increasing immersion. There is a great unknown and threat in this world, and there's a thrill of feeling your way through the world intended to bring the joy of discovery and travel. I think this is one of the joys that the old classic RPGs had, and we wanted to aim for that in this game. There is what you would call a world map for the open field areas. You can set a waypoint, travel to uncharted areas, and enjoy revealing the map. On the other hand, as in the Dark Souls series, there is no map in the big dungeon areas. We want you to enjoy figuring out the layout through exploration and to have that great feeling when you finally do. So it seems like there's a large exterior world map, similar perhaps to a classic JRPG like Final Fantasy, or maybe even Skyrim or Breath of the Wild, that you explore with your horse. Here, unlike any other modern From Software game, you'll actually have a map that you'll uncover as you discover new locations. According to Miyazaki, besides the extremely thought-out vertical legacy dungeons, there are many small to medium-scale dungeon areas. Forts, catacombs, caves, mining tunnels, etc. We are planning to have many NPCs, but currently there are no towns or villages where they reside. There are places that were once villages, but are now abandoned and the prowling places of dangerous enemies. So I imagine that all of these smaller to medium scale dungeons, forts, and the rest are a part of this larger map and area you traverse on horse. To my mind, it will probably be somewhat like my previous examples of Breath of the Wild or Skyrim. However, once you find a legacy dungeon, the area within is much more like a classic Dark Souls dungeon. So imagine you're traversing along the world and you stumble upon the Tower of Latria. Once you enter Latria, you no longer have a map and you'll have to explore just like you did in Demon Souls. I'm not sure how you enter these legacy dungeons, and if it will be something like a large castle you'll stumble upon that you'll explore, or if it's something you warp to. Something I brought attention to in my trailer breakdown video was this scene of a hand grabbing a naked character, who I think is the player. Initially I thought this was something from the beginning of the game and how you enter the lands between. I still think that's likely the case, but it's worth mentioning that a similar mechanic could just be how you enter into legacy dungeons. Although I'd like to think every legacy dungeon will be different both in style and how you enter it, and can't wait to see how From Software will surprise us. Further helping with this large scope of the game, Elden Ring will feature a fast travel system. However, we still don't know the exact details of how this system will work. Miyazaki has stated that you won't have to defeat every boss in the game in order to win, and that many of them are skippable. Furthermore, the order and timing of most of the boss battles is completely up to the player. While the Dark Souls games, in particular, have always included elements of this, according to Miyazaki, this level of freedom and order of progression will be even more heightened in Elden Ring. Something relatively new to aid you in traversing these areas is the ability to jump. This is, of course, a mechanic that was in Sekiro, but is now being introduced into a much more standard Souls-like game. As I mentioned before, the horse will be able to jump, which will aid you in traversing the world. I imagine that means there will be many hidden nooks for you to find in the world, and dangerous ledges you'll have to try to jump off of or land on to find hidden weapons, armor, and more. Additionally, in the trailer, we saw that the horse can seem to jump straight up certain cliffs. Although, notably, before your horse does this, they actually jump off of a special magical ring, so you'll probably be limited in the specific ability to certain spots that From Software allows you to actually launch from. In other words, that rock creature with a bell under it and building on top, you probably won't be able to just launch up to the building, unless hitting the bell creates one of those magical jumping rings, who knows. Miyazaki has hinted jumping will be a major element to exploring legacy dungeons and expressed that jumping adds a new dimension of freedom. Perhaps, especially players who have played a lot of Dark Souls series will find this refreshing. While gravity was the #1 OP enemy of Dark Souls, it seems that jumping has completely changed the way falling and fall damage will work. We've adjusted fall damage to make the game less stressful, considering that the freedom allowed by jumping is an important part of the game. We've made it so enemy attacks won't cause you to fall unfairly and have also adjusted the fall damage down. Bandai Namco's website included this story dump, and we get a little more of a breakdown from Hidetaka Miyazaki. The background mythology of Elden Ring's world was crafted by George R.R. Martin, which involves the lands between. Here, a race called the Demigods have received the blood of the divine Queen Marika, and are heroes that rule this land, having received a particularly powerful blessing. All who receive this blessing have a golden light in their eyes, but these people have lost this light. They are called Tarnished because they have lost this golden light from their eyes and are driven out of the lands between. The Tarnished, who is the protagonist of the game, is a descendant of the people who were driven out of the lands between. And now, when the Elden Ring, which forms the source of the blessing of the Golden Tree, has been shattered, this once lost blessing is returned to the Tarnished who reside outside the lands between. It is a rumbling to become the king, which beckons you to the lands between and to the Elden Ring. In the trailer, we're told the Tarnished will fight or die in an unending curse. So, similar to Dark Souls, your character, a Tarnished, would seem to have an undead curse upon them. I find it likely that part of this beckoning that calls your character to the lands between involves this particular shot of a hand grabbing a character and taking them away. Your mission is to defeat the various demigods who were once heroes of the land but grew mad with power after obtaining a shard of the Elden Ring. You play as one of the many descendants of the Tarnished who lost their grace and were exiled from the lands between long ago, as Miyazaki revealed in an interview with IGN, and that would indicate you aren't the only Tarnished who has been beckoned back to the lands between. He states, "I feel like one of the main themes of the game is how the player, the Tarnished, approaches or treats this newfound grace and this return to the land that they were once banished from, how they interpret this and the meaning. It's not just the player character, of course, it's lots of characters in the game who are all beckoned back and will have their own adventures and motives. We want the players to discover for themselves what that means and how they want to begin their adventure." While I'm sure that there will be plenty of bosses, as there are 6 legacy dungeons, and Miyazaki has stated that these are the domains of the major demigod characters, that leads me to believe there will be a total of 6 demigods. And it's my suspicion that many of these demigods are those who we saw in the original Elden Ring trailer. I find it likely that the 2019 trailer may have been footage from the intro cinematic to the game introducing the demigods of the world. The silver-haired and crowned demigod with multiple hands is featured in the original trailer and then prominently in the gameplay trailer. Another one is the Valkyrie-like character who has a detachable arm and who we see absolutely obliterating a player character in the gameplay trailer. Another character we see is a large warrior with massive boar-like armor who I can't find in the gameplay trailer. This looks to be straight from a cutscene about the war that broke out after the Shattering. It's possible this character is either dying from the war, or could be another one of the demigods. Miyazaki has stated of these demigods that we wanted to depict these beings as not just creatures and horrible monsters, but have an element of heroism and an element of mythology to them. Essentially, they are the old gods of this world. As the demigods were all heroes of their time, I find it strongly possible that this particular knight with wings in the gameplay trailer is another one of the major demigods. According to Miyazaki, part of the design of these major characters is that inheriting the shards of the Elden Ring, they each inherited a different power or element, so to speak, and each was twisted and warped in its own way, and it brought a tainted strength to each of them. This well describes why one of the demigods has so many arms, and I think that could describe the wolf-like boss we see in the gameplay trailer as well, who just might be another one of the 6 demigods. One thing I still wonder about is the blacksmith in the trailer. Do you think it could be this character from the gameplay trailer with dreadlocks? I'm honestly not sure. Some more story-related details we know about Elden Ring are that, for the most part, the story will be told more akin to the Souls games, or Bloodborne, with fragments the player will need to piece together. I'm personally a fan of this style of storytelling in games, which is why I've made several From Software lore videos over the years, and I'm looking forward to discovering an all-new mythology this way. Although for those of you who like the story to be a little less obtuse, it does sound like the game's surface-level story will be a little easier to understand and possibly take some cues from the storytelling of Sekiro. As with every modern From Software game, there will be multiple endings to Elden Ring. This one deserves its own category. I'm sure we all fondly remember the Valley of Defilement, Blighttown, Harvest Valley, the Nightmare Frontier, Farron Keep, and the Ashina Deaths. Maybe even the Big Mine, the Path of Poison, or mines filled with bacon logs over poison, for my Kingsville bros out there. Ah yes, the best areas of any From Software game. Poison swamps. The best. The best. They're back! We have confirmation Elden Ring will have a poison swamp. Oh boy! Elden Ring releases January 21, 2022. Let me know if there are any details that have you excited, and what I might have missed between this and my trailer breakdown. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, and make sure to stick to GameSpot for more Elden Ring. I guarantee you that myself and Timur Hussein will be incessantly talking about Elden Ring the closer and closer to release we get, and I'll see you guys next time.